week, Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you three major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This weekend, we're bringing you each of these stories separately so you can listen over a shorter, discrete period of time. Hope you enjoy them.
For the last 5 years, MASLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to surfing the MASH tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we are sharing the three main sections from our episode 9. Roger will provide more information after these notes from our sponsors.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations.
Regeneron is a leading biotechnology company that invents, develops, and commercializes life-transforming medicines for serious diseases. Founded and led by physician scientists, their unique ability to repeatedly translate science into medicine has led to numerous approved treatments and product candidates in development, most of which were homegrown in their laboratories. They are shaping the next frontier of medicine with data-powered insights from the Regeneron Genetics Center and pioneering genetic medicine platforms, enabling them to identify innovative targets and complementary approaches to potentially treat diseases like obesity and MASH.
LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. LiverRight is America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight. That's liver then R-I-G-H-T as if one word, at www.liverright.com.
Tawazun Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazun Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers, now in over 30 countries around the globe. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about Tawazun Health or our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazun Health link on the Surfing MASH homepage. In this conversation, Jörn Schattenberg and Louise Campbell join Roger Green as he shares two major issues for the first half of 2025. In the first, Roger asks what the impact of the Trump/Kennedy administration management of healthcare will have on Americans' longevity and quality of life. In the second, he anticipates competition in the in-office scanning market.
Our roundtable this month, and it will only be 3 episodes, so it's kind of quasi-month, are going to be our 3 co-hosts, Jörn and Louise and me, looking back at the first half of 2025 and asking what's the most important thing that happened from where each of us sit in terms of steatotic liver disease, and what do we think will be the most important thing in the next 6 months. Why don't we dive into our episode? If you live in the States, certainly 2025 has been a fascinating year, but I think it's been a fascinating year for the liver community around the world. We've already talked about some of these things in earlier episodes, but what we're each going to do today is take a few minutes and talk about what we think from our own vantage points are the most important or interesting thing that's happened in the world of steatotic liver disease in the first 6 months of the year. And then we'll go back and talk about what we think will be the most important thing to happen in the second 6 months of the year. I have 2 trends I'm interested in, but I'm going to mention the first one and then do the second one. I'm terribly interested in what's going on with the U.S. government. On the second day of Donald Trump's first term back in 2016, his political advisor, Kellyanne Conway, said that what we would learn was that they had alternate facts, they call them. And under Bobby Kennedy Jr., we're seeing alternate facts coming to medicine in a big way. He suggested, for example, that government scientists should not be allowed to publish in major medical journals anymore because those journals might not be accurate. He's put in key political positions people who have been fact deniers, vaccine deniers, things like that. And there's a general trend throughout the Trump administration to devalue data. That's really scary. By the time this episode airs, we'll have had at least one conversation with an expert who's spent the last 6 months observing the stuff in detail, which is why I'm not going to touch on it today beyond mentioning it. The other interesting thing that's happening is we're starting to see what I'm going to call the first green shoots of competition pop up in the area of in-office scanning that we're now seeing in the States. Nobody has critical mass except EchoSense yet, but we're seeing 4 or 5 other companies companies that are starting to launch and to go into sales and distribution and contracting and things like that. To me, the interesting battle there is going to be between machines like FibroScan, where data stays resident in the machine, and companies like Escopics, which is a transient elastography company, or Sonic Insights, which is actually a shear wave company, where the machine is basically dumb. The information gets transmitted to the cloud, and at some central location, data is stored and analyzed in the aggregate. Difference being that if we're thinking in terms of artificial intelligence or the ability to aggregate and make sense of data in ways that we didn't originally anticipate, the companies with the dumb machines will have a real advantage over the companies with the smart machines because they'll be able to aggregate a lot more data faster from a lot more places. It also probably means their devices will be less expensive, although I'm not sure how that's going to work. But it will be fascinating to see if the companies, well, Escopic, Sonic for two, I don't know about the Mindray machine, whether that's in fact a smart machine or a dumb machine. I know that a couple of the other companies like HiSky make a point of saying our data never goes up in the cloud, which would put them on the same side that the EchoSense is on. I'm wondering whether in fact the dumb machines with the greater AI capabilities, and the technology of the machines are as good as or better than the EchoSense technology for actual measurement on site. When I say dumb machines, it's entirely in terms of how much analysis the machine can do as compared to you send it to the cloud to get done. It will be interesting to see whether any of those machines that are based on cloud-based analyses can actually get a foothold in the market. Because of the kinds of things that Jorn started talking about in the first place, about how much information and intelligence can we glean from non-invasive tests, our ability to accumulate large data sets as we treat more patients simply because the treatment aggregates in the course of analyzing the individual patient should make it easier to find those kinds of things. But obviously, EchoSense has a tremendous head start in the market and the analytical tools and a lot of endorsements. I think it'll be fascinating to watch that evolve. Louise, you may have a better understanding of where EchoSense is going and where FibroScan is going on this issue than I do, but I'm interested in both your thoughts about that.
Yeah, let me just respond quickly and then hand it back to Louise, because I think, the paucity, the amount of data that the physician can handle is clearly limited at one point. We're not at a time point where we have all this data together in one electronic healthcare system or record in all systems. In my view, that's one of the limitations where we don't have that data all available. Some offices are still using paper-based records, and then the patient comes over, he brings his paper to the other office. A lot of it sounds very plausible and technically possible, but I think the medical systems in many instances are still lacking behind. And then the patient always needs the physician or the nurse to be speaking to. But on the back end, you could have integration of data using the type of technologies you're displaying, Roger, I think. And I know Louise might have some views on that too.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, we've got to welcome into the space any non-invasive shear wave or diagnostic that's accurate. It's about the data, it's about the information behind, and it's also about what they show. For example, Escopics, I like it. My concern as a user is that it shows me a real-time image of the liver. Now, I can see a liver mass on that, but I'm only there to talk about the stiffness and the kilopascals it gives me. If I don't report that liver mass, what is my professional indemnity going to say? If that patient then goes on to be diagnosed later down the line with a liver tumor, and I've seen it. So for me, it's about writing the right protocols and support in place to be able to use that in the UK. It is a regulated device in the UK, and therefore it is highly monitored, or certainly in England. Different areas of the UK have different regulatory paths. But where I sit in England, I am accountable for what I say at that scan. And it's an ultrasound machine. The same way as a sonographer, if they do that scan and they see that, they have to report it. For me, I love the toy. And I think it is very mobile. I think putting it in there and getting up is really good. EchoSense, with their devices, it doesn't show me that. It shows me liver tissue. I know I'm in the right space. It shows me a shear wave. And therefore, I can't report a tumor, because actually it would probably read 75. And I can move the probe and I'm going to find a softer area. And I'll often report 2 distinct areas of tissues in the liver in the same region, 1 or 2 ribs up. It's not necessarily the top of the liver or the base, which we've discussed before, are going to be higher in stiffness. So I've not used Sonic Insights, but again, it's MRI based. So therefore it's going to be highly regulated. And therefore we can use any device as long as we put the right governance, protocols and safety in to be able to discuss that with patients. FibroScan now have liver management platform, which means that everything that I get from the machine goes straight up onto the cloud if I choose to put it there. And they've now recently, I think this week or last week, they've updated all the interpretation guides. They've got new clinical pathways on there. They're working out the BMI for you. You can do the FIB4 and different things. So their machines are able to now go up, and in trusts where the Diacom works, you can put them straight into the radiology system. So there's a bit of an issue with that there, but I think that's just quirky for some of the stuff. But I think the machines are getting more techno, but I think we have to be just wary, as I've said, about the governance and the issues about people doing those tests and making sure they are as protected as they can be when they're doing the test and giving that information. But otherwise, we can use all of them. But it's also one of the reasons that we use the MyLife365.me app is that's a person app. Everything else is about putting something in a patient's medical records. They can't see it. They can't engage with it. They can't really remember it. I did a 21-year-old the other day. He was 18 the last time I did him, so a long time ago. And the first thing he said was, I can't see any green on the machine. He knew what his ratings were because I do it in colour schemes. He didn't remember his numbers or his scores, but he knew his liver health because of the colour schemes we use. So it is about that engagement. So he hadn't had one for 3 years. He's 21 and was going, where's the green? So he was excited about getting it. We have a lot of data, a lot of information, but actually let's use it to help motivate. Let's use it to help engage patients in their liver care, because a lot of people will be engaged in poor liver health. And a lot of people say, well, I've got a bit of fat in my liver. Let me change it. I can alter that. And they're the ones who won't progress, hopefully, to being patients. May need more cardiovascular assessment because they've had it. But let's use all of these toys, because something like e-scopics and hepatoscope is far more suited in areas in the middle of Africa, middle of the outback, Australia, places like that, where you just have a probe that you put onto your laptop. So there's lots of benefits to different machines, and I'd welcome them all into the space.
So a naive question, right? What percentage of the liver actually gets captured by these various devices? I mean, you mentioned the idea of a mass or a tumor. What are the odds that there'll be a mass or tumor in the liver in a place I'm not looking?
Yeah, I think that's a very important comment you make, Roger. And you have to keep in mind that the type of elastography or fat measures we're using here are not diagnostic ultrasounds to rule out any other liver disease, which is a total different indication. Asking that question, a physician that needs to interpret the image, maybe I can help at one point, but this is not designed to detect those masses, and it might miss, your metastatic liver cancer in your fatty liver disease because that's not looked for. So the combination of traditional ultrasound is required here, interpretation by a physician, and that's, I think, a whole different avenue you have to take, obtaining images, reading them, and interpreting them. So none of that is going to happen on these diagnostics.
That would have been my guess, right? My hunch. And when Louise mentioned the idea that you could see a liver mass and then what do you do? In the highly litigious United States, that's a screaming malpractice case. Now, I don't know how that gets resolved.
It is about the appropriate training, because we can use these toys. We can really benefit them. And I think making sure that people are protected at all times and that the information there is good. Because if you see it, you are under obligation to mention something. Well, this may be a little bit abnormal. Maybe we should get some more investigation with this and that. So there are ways to do it. But again, that's all about the governance, the policies and procedures in place, which is part of doing what we do, is the fact that you have to have those because you have to have standards. And the CQC regulates, so we are very clear on the standards that we should be compliant with for FibroScan in England anyway. If we look at FibroScan, it's 3 cubic centimetres, and I think it's 1/5,000th of the liver. So it's a bigger part of the liver. Don't quote me on the specifics there, but it is a lot bigger, but it is only one part of the liver. If I go into slightly different area, I might find a different steatotic level, but it's going to be in the same region. And that's the reason that we talk about it in a way of it's indicative of, or this stiffness could indicate. And I think the more we don't use biopsy, the more we're using non-invasive tools for these, no matter what the tool is, we cannot say what that underlying tissue is because we don't have a biopsy to pair it with. But we do have a device by Echosense, which is FibroScan, which has been paired with more liver biopsies than any other machine will probably ever have the benefit of doing because it was so early into the field. And we've gone beyond the biopsy in a lot of areas. That actually means that the evidence is less, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't be utilised. What we need to do is do the head-to-heads, use them in clinical practice, and actually put them into the right practices where they're going to be hugely beneficial. Knowing somebody's liver health in any part of the world is beneficial.
Okay. With that, let's take the last maybe 10 minutes we've got and talk about what might happen in what we're looking at for the next 6 months that might be different. Big story second half of the year. I can start on that. The big story in the U.S. is going to be as the effects of the Trump administration policies take effect, what will that mean mean? They're already canceling a bunch of FDA meetings, for example, around vaccine and prevention. If we see a slowdown in drug approvals because there just aren't enough people to do the work, which is what we're seeing in large parts of the government, then it may mean that the trial horizons for people to get to market aren't what we would have expected. Things might get to market later, number one. We know that fewer patients will be on Medicaid. We know that what's available to people who are on Medicaid will be narrowed. I don't know if that's going to happen at the VA or in the Medicare drug programs as well. So in the U.S., I think a lot of this is going to be watching and seeing what slows down and by how much, and what new non-medical and maybe even non-scientific approaches are proposed and promulgated by the government and through the government. We could be taking big steps backwards or not. We'll have to see. But that would be my U.S. issue, my next 6 months issue.
Interesting views on politics. I'd say looking forward, we're going to, in the next 6 months, we're going to see in the field of clinical trials, we're going to see much more patients going into phase 3 trials that study cirrhotic patients, big unmet needs. They're not going to be completed in that time frame, but I think we'll make big advances in enrolling patients into these clinical trials where you have the highest unmet need population, looking both at outcomes but also liver histology as a surrogate. With the support of big clinical research networks, this will be achieved. Multinational trials, I think we might see additional trials being started, maybe even beyond the classical surrogate endpoints with outcomes in cirrhotic and non-cirrhotic populations. So I think we'll see a lot more positive and forward-thinking clinical trial designs where patients will benefit, and eventually down the line, additional drugs that reach approval even for the cirrhotic patients. Now, that's not going to happen in the next 6 months, but I think we'll make good progress in enrolling these clinical trials.
I think I'll probably echo what Jean's saying, but for me, it's going to be watching the space on, are we going to start to look at real ways that we can increase capacity? The ability to, let's see how we're going to rack up increasing the amount of screening that they're going to be able to do to find these patients who need the medications. And I think Sean's right. We probably will end up treating the most severe first. That's what we did with viral hepatitis C, watching the transplant need drop off and the decompensation improve and slow down. If we can stop people getting to decompensation, then their mortality is better. So that's what I'm excited to see, and start to get some of these pathways, governance and quality metrics as we roll out more and more into primary care and areas where people don't have that insight and knowledge about what the non-invasive toys and certainly the stiffness ones talk to you about. So we've got to be very, very clear in the language and designing programs and pathways for patients where we are crystal clear about what we're talking about and how we're phrasing that. And we're not just giving you a herbal product, or we're just doing that. And that's where we need to control this a little bit more for patient safety. So that's what I'm interested to see, because I think we are going to see more approvals. I think we're going to certainly see a few more top-line results from the studies that are coming for the final approval areas. So it's exciting. It is going to be a milestone year, I think.
I think that's right. I agree with that. So let me note a couple of things. First of all, the converse of what I said is that there may be more vitality and interest in the private sector in the U.S. We'll see how that evolves. And second, SEMA should get, is well on track, right? I mean, they've got their studies in place. And if we were to see SEMA get approved in the second half, how this market would operate with 2 approved drugs would be a lot more interesting. So
yeah, I think you're right on that one, because I think SEMA will be probably, the rumour in Australia is SEMA will be the one that's approved first. But of course, we have a lot of FibroScans on the East Coast, mainly in hospitals, but we don't have a lot of FibroScans on the West Coast and in the other states. And we don't have many, if at all, in primary care areas where a lot of this is going to be done. So it's going to be, and it's not Medicare refunded. So although they might get a drug approval at the moment, there may not be anywhere to monitor it or the skill set there to do it. So I think it's interesting in different countries as we look.
You want any other thoughts before we go?
No, I think it's still a very active and exciting field in history for the treatment of MASH, both on the biomarker side, but also on the therapeutics will become available. First drugs are here. The ones in the pipeline look great. And again, we're attacking the cirrhotic population. So I'm very optimistic for our patients.
And more drugs, more diagnostics, and better availability of data just means we're going to learn faster and faster. Very exciting stuff. All right. Well, thanks both of you. We'll be back in a few weeks. I think Louise and I are on the next one, and we'll be talking about care issues. And then after that, we'll be back to talk about drugs and advances in Paris NASH and other things that I'll talk about in the business section. So thanks, folks.
On behalf of the surfers, our guests, and our sponsors, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, Liver Right, and Tawazun Health, Thanks for joining us this week.
Please join us again next week for a series of roundtables and interviews covering major recent issues in the world of steatotic liver disease.
And until next week, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you again on Surfing Master Tsunami Podcast. Bye-bye now.